I'm Lauren Hersey, and I help behind the scenes with the Jim Hill Media team. And we are listening to the Disney Unpacked community, and it sounds like what you really want to see is more behind the scenes of what the guys are working on. And boy, do I have a treat for you today. I'm here with Disney Imagineer of 33 years, Jim Shull, and he's going to be walking us through the animation process for Disney and for Disney Unpacked, which is so exciting. But before we get into that, if you are not familiar with Jim and you may have just stumbled upon this video, I want to give Jim an opportunity to let us get to know him a little bit better. So, Jim, why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about how you got hooked up with Disney and maybe some of the roles that you held while you had your 33-year career at the company?
Well, Lauren, I don't know if there's any real magic secret except that you have to love Disney. And I always loved the Disney company. I love theme parks. I loved animation. In fact, it led me to being an animator. And in that role, I worked for different television shows, both for the Disney company and others of its competitors. I mean, a lot of times my son would torture me on Christmas by giving me DVDs of old TV shows that I didn't think were all that great, but nevertheless, he thought they were funny to give Dad complete box sets of GoBots and My Little Pony and He-Man and She-Ra and Pound Puppies and Winnie the Pooh. Anyway, in that capacity of, working in TV animation, I ended up working a lot for the Disney company. And one day in that role, I got a phone call to come over for an interview at Walt Disney Imagineering, which is there in Glendale, California. Now, if you know about it, originally it started on the Burbank lot, but after a while, it outgrew the Burbank lot and it moved over to Glendale, California. And its original office was there on Sonora. And over time, it grew and took over a lot of different other buildings. One was an old relish factory. One made cosmetics. Actually, even one made caskets. So it's kind of like the circle of life of
Literally.
literally anything you'd possibly want. And it was called the Glendale campus, the WDI campus. Even though WDI has offices worldwide, our headquarters was there and still is there in Glendale, California, and has been for over 70 years.
Okay, so when you started with the Disney company, were you an Imagineer right out the gate, or did you have to pay your dues?
Well, I think you pay your dues, but no, I mean, I was an Imagineer. I came in a different role, though, than I ended up in. I was a show designer. And as a show designer, my role essentially was when I had a ride, you would have the environment that would surround the guests in that ride. And that's what I was in charge of. So I would get building plans and work with facility managers and construction managers, and then lay out what the design for the show environment was going to be. And in that regard, I actually had to put my animation talents back to use because I ended up doing a lot of Fantasyland type rides.
Okay. So, can you walk us through what did your day-to-day look like? I know so many people dream of having a job where you get to be creative and working on rides and working, with the Disney company. What was the day-to-day like?
Well, every day was different, and that's what made it special because it never got boring. And I'll admit, I'm a person with very little bandwidth as far as attention span. I always want to be led into the next more exciting new thing. So typically my day would be at my desk working on a project, and then I'd go into meetings with different groups. And WDI would have maybe 80 disciplines. So I might be sitting down with a landscape designer, for example, and picking plants that would grow in the location that we were going to be building in, but also plants that would support the story we were trying to tell. For example, in Paris, for their Storybook Land Canal boat, which I designed, we had to find miniature little trees that looked like they were scaled properly to the Black Forest of Germany, even though in reality, they might only be 12 inches tall on the outside. So that's a typical example of a kind of an unusual kind of an unusual environment that I found myself operating in. Again, as I said, every day was different, and that was made it all so much fun.
Yeah, that I mean, it is super fun. And when I think of, animations, I recall seeing that photo of you drawing
Right.
um Slinky Dog from Toy Story. And last week I texted you, and I think that's how this whole kind of show came to be about your role in developing Toy Story Land and how your animations played a part. And I believe you said you were the executive creative director. What does that mean?
Well, it means that, remember when I said I was a show designer when I started at WDI in May of 1998? Well, the executive creative director, well, they supervise and lead all those show designers. In fact, they lead any role that pertains to the show itself. A way I describe being an executive creative director is they're both the shepherd and the torchbearer for the idea. So once you start with the idea that everyone agrees is a really good one, let's say like a Toy Story Land or Rock and Roller Coaster, then my job was to make sure that we never deviated from the idea. We always held to the core value of the idea that everyone fell in love with. And that process would take anywhere from 4 to 5 to even 7 years from the beginning when we got a yes, go do this, until the day finally came when we, pulled out the scissors and cut the ribbon for everyone to come inside the land or ride.
Okay, so now I'm gonna stick in the United States for a minute. With your animations and some of your art that you've done, if I'm at Disney World and we're gonna be at Disney World next week,
We
like
are.
what can somebody go to the park and see that you had a hand in?
Oh, let me see. Well, again, in over 33 decades,
A lot.
yeah, no, it was a long time. It went fast, but it was a long time. But in that regard, I did a lot of work. For example, over the Magic Kingdom, I did the Magic Carpets of Aladdin. Over in the studios, I did 100 Years of Magic, which was a celebration for Walt Disney's 100th birthday. I worked over a lot of blue sky work for Epcot, the majority of which never saw the daylight. It's in a drawer somewhere in a vault over in Glendale.
Oh,
Uh,
can I ask you real quick? Is it a little bit soul crushing if like you put your heart and soul into
oh,
creating something like what
absolutely.
you did for
Oh,
Epcot and then it didn't get used?
I know. Unfortunately, you know, the confidentiality agreement, which I first signed, forbids me from going and cracking that vault open. But yeah, you put your heart and soul into something, and when the time comes, which you're told for usually very legitimate reasons, you're not going to have your project open. Yeah, it's a little bit soul crushing, but usually what happens is the very next day I get a phone call and someone say, "Hey, I heard you're not busy. I heard you're available. Would you please come and work on my project? Are you interested?" And usually, if it was something that interested me, I signed up and I was back working again for another 4 to 5 years.
That helped relieve the sting just a little bit.
Yeah, it was. But again, it comes down to you find what you love and, you put all your passion into what you love and it doesn't seem like work.
Well, speaking of what you love, I mean, we've been working together now, 6 months or so.
Hmm.
And I know you've been working on Unpacked with Jim and Len
Oh,
for years. And I really get
yeah.
the sense that you're loving what you're doing. And we, the viewers, get to see all of your amazing animations. Can you tell us, before we're going to jump into how you create those animations, how many have you done?
Oh, good grief. Lauren, that's a wonderful question. When I started on the animations, I thought, oh, I'll just do a couple. And what we ended up with in the first season, which we've already filmed and written, there are over 80 animations. Now,
Wow.
that doesn't include all the other animations since I've come to work with you, to do all of the social media outreach. Because when Jim and I go to record all the stories that we didn't have time for in a Disney Unpacked show, we have Disney Unpacked Carry On. Well, those need animations. And now we also have all of our viewer questions and they need animations. And then you reach out and say, "Hey, Jim, can you give me a social media animation?" Well, that's more animation. So, I know that it started. My last count was 80, and I haven't checked since, but it's been a lot.
Is your hand tired?
My hand, no, my stylist. So I do, I do have a new pack of nibs for my stylist that I continue to renew.
All
So
right.
yeah, and by the way, I
So
should say that everything I do now is digital. It's been digital for about 2 decades. So I have a big Wacom here in front of me, and everything that I can share with you is something I create here in my little office studio here in Santa Cruz, California, and I do it on my Wacom.
all right, well, I can't wait to see it. So before I do though, like out of all the animations that you've made for Disney Unpacked, what's been your favorite? Can you
Oh,
pick one?
It's got to be Mr. Gator. I mean, that's kind of the rabbit hole we fall into again as a character animator. And I did a lot of characters, and I'm always the cute guy. I was always the funny guy at WDI. I would do a Fantasyland. You wouldn't put me into Tomorrowland because it's all dry and didactic. But if you had a character, I would really excel at that. Which is why I did Mickey's Toontown and later on Toy Story and then Nemo and a lot of other things for Pixar. Um, but in that regard, I created a new character. We just call him Mr. Gator for one of the original early Disney Unpacked shows. And he keeps finding his way back and back and back into all the different shows that we do. So,
Does he have like a personality? Because when I think of him, like I feel like he has a personality. What do you think his personality is?
oh, he's very much a flirting gator. He's very laid back. He chills. He just, whatever, dude. He's kind of a really, Margaritaville kind of guy.
He's just living his best life. It's what we
Oh,
all want,
totally.
right, Mr. Gator?
Yeah. Well,
All
that's the
right, Jim.
soundtrack.
Let's not make these folks wait any longer. So we're going to try to do this. This isn't just a one and done, but again, we're trying to give you what you want. So make sure that you're putting in the comments, what do you like? What do you want to see? Because fingers crossed, this is the first of many. So Jim is going to show us how he creates animations. And I'm going to invite you to go ahead and share your screen. And if you got kiddos, if you got nieces, nephews, I know if they've been to the parks, they're like, how do I become an Imagineer someday? How do I get to do something fun like that? Go grab those kiddos and show them this video. So go ahead and share your screen and we'll jump in.
Behind the scenes secrets of how an animator animates, especially if they're doing it for Disney Unpacked. You can see here I create a base layer and I'm working in Photoshop on a Wacom tablet. Now I happen to use a 24-inch or 23-inch, I forget which I like because even though you can get something larger, the smaller sizes have better color calibration. And I use that in connection with my stylus. But what I really do then is I start to create a sense of layers, and I have all my layers, but first I have a white layer. And once I have my white layer, then I can go and I can grab my stylus and I can start drawing. And I happen to like this blue tint color because, well, when I animated by hand, it was a color pencil that I liked. It's an old animator's pencil. You have a blue for drawing, and then you have a red for doing final work to pick out the line you want. And again, you can see that this is pretty sketchy and it's in Photoshop on a tablet. So if I don't like a line, I can grab my eraser and remove it. I can then grab different layers if I want, and I can expand or contract or tilt those. So I work through my process, and a lot of it is iterative. I'll work on it for a while, then kind of back up and think about the context. I might have some reference off to the side on my screen, but I in conjunction to the whole, I'll think in terms of what is the story I'm trying to tell, and then create a little character who can be telling that story. In this case, Mr. Gator. And in this case, Mr. Gator has the role of being a gondolier, operating his little gondolier boat on the canals at Disney World. Because we all know there are a lot of canals there at Disney World. So if you have canals, obviously there must be gondoliers, there must be alligators. So I play along for a while and I continue to do all of this. And usually it takes, anywhere around 3 to 4 minutes to get to kind of something that I like. And I'll play with it. And a lot of it is, remember, what I always say are these are lines on paper. So if it's not perfect, start over. You haven't harmed anything. Just keep playing around until you're happy with the result. Now, one thing I will do is the next step after this is I'll then go back and I'll start to create individual layers. And the layers will be titled right arm or left arm, hat, face, eyes, etc., because those will all be important when I start to break apart the layers for the actual animation. Because what I've done here is I've created a character layer. But obviously, I do not want to do this every single panel. And I animate at 24 frames a second, which would mean I'd have to draw this guy 12 times, which an animation is about 10 seconds. So you can do the math. That'd be too many illustrations for me to do. So
we're working smarter, not harder.
Well, yeah, and it's also kind of a real, take back to the old limited animation form, not that you'd find in a Disney feature animation, but more of a Disney television animation where they don't animate on, they don't animate on 4s, they'll animate on 8s, which is half as many drawings. And I do the same thing, but I kind of also, have a harken back to some of the old 1960s, even 1950s style of animation. So I have that, and now I've got it, and I'm really pleased with it. So I'll go and I'll save that, and then I'll go to the next level, which is this level. So now I've got him, and I'll go and I'll check him out. And so it's the same process very much. And again, I have all my layers, and I'll start to do what I call a cleanup. So I'll go in and I'll kind of start to finesse things. And here's an example of, if I don't like a tool, I'll change it. Again, nice thing about digital is, you don't have to throw away your paper. Your paper is electronic. So you just keep playing and working with that. But at the end, we end up with something that I'm pleased with. And then we can start to play and work a little bit more. And you can see off to the side as a cheat. Off to the far right, you'll see a folder that says blue pencil, and below that you'll have river, and below that you'll have big head, boat gator, and boat gator copy 2. And that's an example of how I start to break things apart. And again, this pays dividends to me, because when I want to use gator again in another show, I already have the gator components or the gator layers or the gator elements. So when I'm done with the show, all the components then get filed away into my master file and then backed up. So when I want to do gator for another show in a different role, well, that gator may not be Gondolier Gator. He may be Science Gator or Professor Gator or something else Gator. And so I don't have to draw him from scratch. I can start from a basis or a foundation that I can use. And again, this is an old trick, and it's something I learned in animation, and it pays a lot of dividends. And this is something I use every time I ever do something for Disney Unpacked. Last bit of animation I'll be sharing with you is this. So now we have the finished gator drawing, and everything is done. It's as done as it's going to be, but I want to start to transfer, because again, the style is much more flat. I tend to draw old classic form, so it's going to have volume to it, but in this style of animation, everything is very flat. So you can see what I just did, and I'll run it one more time, is we start with a very, I'll call it plump or volumetric gator, as if you could do a full three-dimensional or 360 turn on this guy. You could do that, but I can't use that for what I'm doing for Disney Unpacked. So I take the drawing then and I start to break it apart and I flatten it. So I'll put all my flat color layers and my shading layers, and I'll break it apart. So I'll have, again, my scarf layer, my head layer, my eye layer, my hat layer, my arm layer, my tail layer. All of these are component parts that individually I can manipulate when I actually go to do the animations themselves. So you might ask, what do I do with all of this? Well,
I'm
this
dying to
is,
know, Jim. Tell us.
so this is it. And let's go and do this slowly. So here's our Mr. Gator. And again, I can do this because I didn't have to draw every single frame, and he's running at 24 frames a second. And I'm animating him on threes or twos now. So they're actually 12 frames every second. And this happens to be a very short animation, only 5 seconds. Typically now our animations are running, anywhere between 12 to 30 seconds.
So how
And
long does it take you to do 12 to 30 seconds?
well, you learn by doing, Lauren. So now, honestly, it takes probably about 3 hours to do one 12-second animation.
Okay. And
But
so has
again,
Mr. Gator gone anywhere else?
he
Or is he
has.
always just on the boat?
Oh no, Mr. Gator gets along. He gets around.
He
He
gets a
gets
lot of
around.
love.
But yeah, he does get a lot of love. But part of it is, uh, here's an example. Here's Mr. Gator where he makes a return, and he brought along a sibling. When we made our announcement for that we were taking Disney Unpacked onto Patreon, my first thought was, let's go tell the world. And how do we talk about all of the 10 shows we'd already scripted and filmed in a very small, limited amount of time? So I came up with this idea. And there are a lot of the characters that some of them you have already seen in the first couple of episodes of Disney Unpacked, and some of them you haven't seen yet because we haven't released those shows. But they're coming, I promise you. But you can see where a lot of the characters appear, including Mr. Gator and his sibling. But again, this is lots and lots and lots of work, which was lots and lots of fun to do. But we wanted to use animation to convey just what we were doing and also how much fun it was to do it.
That's so cool. So we know for tools, if you want to start to become an animator, I guess, what kind of tools do you use besides Photoshop? I know that you had mentioned a tablet. I think you showed me a little video of that process.
Yeah, there's so many tools now at this point. I take into my desk tool is the Wacom using Photoshop. I also use this Illustrator. I animate usually in QuickTime, which isn't the best way to do it, but I can use Premiere if I want. And I'm trying out some new techniques, which I'm not entirely satisfied with yet, but I'm going to. When I go into the field, I take my iPad, my large iPad, and my Apple Pencil, and I have programs there for quick sketches and do a lot of photography. And then I port them back in iCloud to my desktop. So everything then circles back and gets eventually to iCloud, which I can get to. But I think we glanced over one thing that we probably should spend a moment on. At the top of our show, people saw an animation for our title sequence. What I did for that was when I created the master art, when I go to actually do the animations, this is what the animations look like before I go to actually render the animations. So I break them off into individual panels. And again, because I'm working in threes, I will end up doing a panel and then copying it twice to make my thirds. And then I'll do three of the next panel, three of the next, three of the next, three of the next. And I'll look through it and then I'll render it and I'll look at it. And then I'll start to tweak. So I might be happy with something. Maybe it needs a little love. Instead of having it be a 3-panel sequence, it might be a 4. It actually might even be a 2. I might come back and do a lens flare. I might go back and do some effects. It really depends on how I like it and how it looks when I get through with it. One thing I have had people ask me is why some of the animations are jerky. Well, the truth is, Lauren, I like the old, jerkiness.
Me
And there's a
too.
certain, there's a certain charm like that 1950s, rough and ready kind of animation style. In fact, it kind of harkens back to some of the old Disney animations, especially the Mickey Mouse Club. If you look at those, they didn't have the fluidity and the flow that the classic feature work did, but it had a charm to itself. And that's what we're trying to achieve here on.
It's very much your style because I've seen some of your concept art for, rides, shows, attractions. And I mean, if you're looking, once you can't know that it's a Jim Shull piece of art.
Yeah, thank you a lot. I mean, one of the joys I have about, again, creating animations, and we kind of fell into this. Jim Hill and I, when we were scripting the first season, found out really that there are three usages of animations. One is to explain a concept, something that we can't otherwise explain. We have a show coming up when we talk about in France that we have a lot of rain. Well, this is a way to kind of do it, to bring a smile to the viewer's face. At the same time, we try to explain, why did we do this? What is the story point we're trying to make? The second thing that we do is we try to talk about, fun. So, here's one that, we started with Mr. Eisner, Michael Eisner, and he appears in a lot of our shows coming through a doorway to do, shenanigans. And we use him to make a story point. Here's one in using, obviously, Winnie the Pooh. And we found that, this really started to become a trope. And later on in shows, I have the same doorway with the moving sky. We have the Bass brothers walking through the door. We have Jules Verne walking through the door. You never know who's going to come through that door. But again, it's in service of the story. And again, we want the viewers to have a smile and not just learn about Disney, because there's lots of places you can pick up a book, or there are other great YouTube channels, but we want to bring something different and unique and fun to the table. So in that service, that's where we're bringing the animations to life.
And I like the little Jim Shull that's in the plane or in the car that
Oh
travels.
yeah.
And the Eisner, I'm a huge Eisner fan. So anytime he makes an appearance, which he's been in a lot.
He has, but someone else who started making appearances, Lens Cat. And we fell into this in one of our for one of the very first, maybe it was the first, Disney Unpacked Q&As, because we love to get questions from our viewers. We love to, open the mailbag and, see what the people are asking about. And so due to the nature of Q&A, Len's generally not going to be in that. And so I started to poke at the idea of, well, where is Len? And so out of that idea came Lens Cat, which this is the first time you saw Lens Cat, and this is the first of many, many times you're going to see Lens Cat. So what we ended up with is this whole little menagerie of characters, a cast of characters with Lens Cat and the doorway that Eisner comes through, and Mr. Gator and me in the plane. There's a whole family of characters that we started to develop, and they paid dividends and had a lot of fun with them, both in season one and in seasons to come.
Well, they're great. You are such a talented individual, and I'm really grateful to have spending time with you and learning more. And so if somebody has stumbled upon this video and they want to know more about Disney animation, about animating, and they're not familiar with Disney Unpacked, why don't you tell them a little bit about the show and where we're at and how you can find us?
Well, Disney Unpacked really came out of the idea of, taking the three talented individuals who spent over 100 years studying the Disney company. You have Jim Hill, who's an entertainment writer with over 40 years of experience, who's done hundreds of articles with a research deep dive, may I add, of the Disney company, both of animation and theme parks and film. You have Len Testa, who's president of Touring Plans, who is a preeminent, in my opinion, guide to all things Disney as far as how to navigate the parks, especially at Disney World. Although he has interest in other parks as well. So he's a really strong expert. The third person at this party is me. I'm Jim Shull, and I worked at Disney for over 3 decades as a executive creative director, overseeing ride shows and attractions in all of the parks worldwide. And so what I think I can bring to the table is an insight into connecting the dots of the Venn diagram of not only the stories about the Disney parks that and the rides you love, but also the reasons why they're there, and maybe a little bit of knowledge and insights and context for things that you just have thought about, but really didn't have the answers to. So that's the whole idea behind Disney Unpacked, to deliver quality, informative, and fun stories, shows, and social media on a very consistent basis. We're aiming for every week to drop something. We have our big show, which is Disney Impact. We have Disney Unpacked Carry On, which is a show to itself, which is all the stuff we just didn't have room for. We have Disney Q&A. And then we always have our special shows, like the one that we just recently did up in Boston for Thanksgiving. So
Yeah, so there's always information, but we're trying to be cognizant of what the Disney Unpacked community wants to see. So if you have questions for Jim, Len, put them in the comments, send us an email. Let us know what you want to see. And who knows, maybe the questions that you have will be used in future episodes of our shows. So thank you, Jim, for taking the time and being here today, and hopefully more to come. Fingers crossed, right?
yeah, exactly. Thank you again, Lauren. This has been fantastic. These are our opening weeks of Disney Unpacked. It has been nothing but fun. And honestly, I just look forward to what we're being, working together and sharing in the future. So let's get back to work.
All right, back at it.
Jim Hill here. If you've been enjoying Disney Unpacked on YouTube, be sure and head on over to Patreon and join our community. Not only will you receive the entire Jim Hill Media suite of podcasts ad-free, but you'll also get bonus episodes of the Disney Dish and, more importantly, the full episodes of Disney Unpacked with more stories from Jim Shull, Len Testa, and I. By joining our Patreon, you are helping us continue to evolve our entertainment offerings and are part of the team. We can't wait to show you some of the other ideas we've been working on. And if you haven't yet, be sure and subscribe to Disney Unpacked on YouTube. Thanks for watching and supporting the team at Jim Hill Media and Disney Unpacked.